Hello.
Hello.
Here we are again
Yes, we are.
for another episode
Mm-hmm.
of Creative Olives.
Mm-hmm.
Who do we have today?
Today we have Auri Jackson.
Tell us more about Auri Jackson.
She's a writer, director, and also sustainability coordinator. She works in sustainability in film.
Very cool. Very cool.
She's gonna talk about.
She's going to tell us all about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about also how to blow up a pipeline.
Yes, the 2023 movie
Amazing.
about this group of people who are blowing a pipeline.
The excitement.
Mm-hmm.
A thriller.
Yeah.
Yay. Our random facts.
Mm-hmm. Our favorite part.
Our favorite part. Should you go first or should I go?
Okay, let me go first.
Yeah, because last time I went on for...
It's okay. Okay, so you watched the Oscars, right?
I did.
Do you know or are you familiar why the Oscars started? What's the history behind it?
Ego? No.
So actually, it's not a very, very
Good one.
Mm-mm-mm.
Doesn't it have to do with the unions?
Yes.
Yeah, I know a little bit.
The first.
I lied.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it has to do about that. The first Oscars in 1929. They happened here in LA, but they weren't televised. I think a couple of years later they started being televised. And it's less about celebrating cinema and more about business strategy. Yeah, so behind all this...
changed.
Yes. So behind all this, Louis B. Mayer from MGM, he was a top executive, created the awards to prevent actors from unionizing because he didn't want the actors to get, sharing revenue, the films. He set up the Academy, as we know today, in order to keep the unions at bay, although IATSE had already unionized because coming from theater, they probably knew that this was coming.
Yeah.
So they were prepared. What about yours?
So my random fact, I won't make it super long, I promise. And it has nothing to do with movies. It has to kind of do with cameras, but not really. But
So it's a generic?
It's a generic random
How
fact.
dare you?
How dare I? Well, it's kind of related to visuals.
This is Creative Olives.
It's Creative Olives. I think you'll like it.
Okay.
So, not too long ago, I was having a conversation about paintings. I was at a museum, and we came across a Rembrandt. And I was talking about Rembrandt and about how detail-oriented he is as a painter and how people are fascinated by that. And there's been a bunch of theories about how he was so detailed in his paintings. And one of the theories, now this is a theory, it's not proven, there's no actual evidence of this, but they do theorize that painters, including Rembrandt and some others of his contemporaries, used a camera obscura to create their paintings, so at least get the detailing of the paintings. And which I know some people are like, oh, how dare you, say that this person used a tool to help them. But I think in all good art, you utilize modern tools to make it better. But I found it interesting because, to me, I was like, oh my God, it's kind of like the first photo, right? Because you're using a projection of an image and then you're tracing it or using it to make an image. And I thought that was super fascinating to kind of look at and see. And it's true that when you look at Rembrandt's paintings and contrast to somebody else,
Let me see.
look it up. His lace detailing, his lighting, he's got and if you look at some of his lace work on some of the clothing, you'll see that. But there's no actual, nobody is oh, absolutely. It's not like they found anything to really prove that. And it's not uncommon for artists to trace work. You can make good art using a different tool. And I think this is what I'm sort of trying to get at with this whole random fact. It's we use a lot of tools to create an image in cinema. And I think that there's something so interesting about how potentially they also use their own tools to create scenery in their own movies and that kind of stuff. I think that's, people have different tools of what they need. And
I agree. You can make art out of different things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why we think photography is an art at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because you're using a machine, right? The same with film, but it's
Yeah.
not that easy. It's not like I took a photo. That's
Yeah. There's more that goes into it, right? Because like, even if I think a lot of people get a little sensitive about saying like, oh, they use the camera obscura, so like, are they really talented or not? Were they actually good painters or not? Well, clearly they were good painters because they were still able to not only just capture the line work, they also get the lighting like so beautifully done. Their brush strokes are very like interesting and like, but also they've created their own still life in it. Like they're directing a scene. Painters directed, like they're the first directors, which I think is really cool because they were like, you know, if they didn't do, they would have models come in, they would study the models, they'd place them certain ways in order to have them and to like replicate them in their paintings and stuff. And it's an early form of directing, which I think is also really cool to point out.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's move on to
our interview.
Yes.
Dun, dun.
Thanks for being here. Yeah.
Thanks for the delicious tea. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
So tell us who you are, what you do.
Sure. My name is Auri, and I am a director and writer, and I also work as a sustainability consultant for film and TV.
Cool. Very cool.
Can you explain a little bit for someone who doesn't know, especially the last part of your job description, what it is?
Sure. So when we make movies and TV shows, we are creating whole worlds, we're moving lots of people, and that takes a lot of materials and fuel and resources to make that happen. So in my job, I work to look for opportunities to empower departments, like heads of departments, to reduce their pollution and waste. Most of it is fuel use, production vehicles and generators.
I was gonna say we pollute a lot as an industry.
Yes.
Even just like the way we manage like craft services and water and all that stuff.
And people like I think a couple of years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a new also role that it was introduced in the industry, because before we weren't. I don't want to say aware, but we didn't pay attention so much.
You know, there's been some amazing, mostly women in studios that have been at this for a while, like over a decade, but it has been more under the radar. I would say that it is more coming into the mainstream now, or it's more expected of every studio to have a sustainability plan. Not that they do, but I think it's more the norm now. But it was originally this group under the PGA called the Sustainable Production Alliance. It's now called the Sustainable Entertainment Alliance. But there was a lot of awesome people working kind of at the forefront for a while now, trying to get this. And there's also resources. Like if you go to the website, Sustainable Entertainment Alliance, there's resources for films and TV shows to green their productions. They have the Green Production Guide. They have tools like the Peach, which is the production environmental action checklist, something.
Wow, I'm impressed.
And then there's also the Pear. It's like a carbon calculator. So those are things that are free for everyone to download.
Oh, that's awesome.
And there's infographics, like so many resources on the Green Production Guide.
That leads me to another question.
Yeah.
There is two, let's say, aspects of sustainability: in front of the screen and behind the screen.
Definitely.
Can you explain a little bit?
Totally, yeah. So we kind of addressed the behind the scenes element already, talking about all the different materials and resources that go into making a film or a TV show. But then there's also the on-screen component, which there's a lot of great organizations that are working around that. I know you've attended the Hollywood Climate Summit a couple of times, which is a event that happens in LA in the summer. And
It's an incredible event.
Yeah.
I highly recommend.
And they get into a lot of the on-screen stories. Basically, the argument is that Hollywood has tremendous cultural power, and there's power to start talking about climate stories. There's been different studies from USC Annenberg and other organizations where they like analyze all the film and TV shows, and they realize, oh, only a small percentage are mentioning the word climate. They're mentioning the word dog more. And not that that's, you know, we shouldn't be making stories about dogs, but I think Dorothy Fortenberry, who's a writer on Handmaid's Tale, put it really well when she said, if your story is based in present day and it doesn't include climate, then it's science fiction.
I love this quote. It's my favorite quote.
Yeah. So I think that really puts it into perspective. And there's a lot of different ways that you can incorporate it. I think obviously the bad version is like preaching and hitting people over on the head with it. And there's a better way to do it. And there's a lot of groups like RARE, which is a research and storytelling group that helps studios and storytellers tell those stories. There's NDRC's Rewrite the Future, and they consult. There's also Good Energy Playbook, and they have a website where you can go on and they kind of break it down into different ways you can incorporate climate into your storytelling. Like there's the climate mention, which is just, you know, talking about it. There's also the
like acknowledging.
Yeah.
It's for example, oh my God, this heat wave is unbearable.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Very simple. Okay.
Yeah. And then there's also like a climate story where it's more like how to blow up a pipeline, where the characters are grappling with it. So there's different shades and hues on how to address it. But it doesn't have to be like annoying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it can be from like learning about it more and more. It can be like small changes. For example, instead of using like a plastic bottle, you can use like a glass.
Yeah, exactly.
It's or a reusable bottle.
Yeah.
They support, and I agree. Subconsciously, then we are more. Next time we're going somewhere, we're more. Like people will think, oh, let me get my reusable cup or my reusable bottle, or let me use a glass instead of buying a plastic bottle.
Yeah, and I think so much of it is invisible too, right? Like we have the party scenes with all the red Solo cups, but that's like the default, and then sort of this self-fulfilling cycle where it's like, as a college kid, you're like, I want the red Solo cup. Right. That's what's cool because that's what I see on the movies. But if they're using aluminum cups or things like this, then perhaps there would be different behavior. There was a lot of people compare it to smoking on screen and how plastics as a new smoking is something that this campaign, Lights, Camera, Plastic, which is from this nonprofit Habits of Waste, they talk about, and how they want to target plastic. I mean, plastic is one element. You can also see, you know, characters composting on screen, and they don't even have to talk about it. They could just be driving an EV.
Yeah.
So there's many different things. It's just kind of questioning, like, why is this the default? Is this the thing we want to be perpetuating still on screen? And sometimes I think it has to make sense for the story. Like maybe it does make sense for the story for a character to use a straw. I'm not saying like don't ever have a character use a straw on screen, but it's just like, is there a way that if it doesn't necessarily matter? I know Marry Me, that rom-com with Owen Wilson, they had his character with like a reusable lunch container. Like really simple, but like something like that you could do.
Yeah.
How do you start with sustainability? What made you be like, okay, I want to be involved, apart from the fact that environment is in a very difficult position, like our climate is, you know, we know.
What made you want to do this?
Totally. So I was a video producer at BuzzFeed for 7 years, and I started working on trending topics. And so I was making a lot of silly videos. Maybe my most silly video was like, women try to tape up their boobs with tape like Kim Kardashian or something like this, right? So that's what I was doing. And then I was like, maybe I would like to do some other types of content. And,
but why? It's so good.
Yeah, not to knock taping boobs, but you know. And then I did this. I came across this thing, Zero Waste. This was like in 2016. And I did this video where I tried to not make trash for 30 days. And that was my gateway drug into environmentalism. And I got really into it. And I think trash is a really easy entry point to people because that's what we see and interact with on a daily basis. And I got really into that and then was like super militant. And I still do my best to reduce my waste, but now I'm looking at things a little more holistically, you know, like I remember being on a plane and being like, oh, I don't want a plastic cup, but that's so dumb because I'm on a plane.
Yeah.
You know, where the impact of the plane ride I was taking is much more than any plastic cup,
Right.
you know, I'm getting. But I think it's a balance, and it's trying to look at things holistically, and also individual action is important, but recognizing too that like it's not Kelly that's the problem, it's Chevron.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Limitation of what you
Yeah.
can do if you're living the society that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say voting too is probably the most sustainable thing you could do as an individual on the political level, but also with your dollars. Like supporting corporations that are sustainable, like looking out for B Corps and fair trade and things like that, where there's, you know, it's kind of overwhelming, I think, as an individual to research every little product.
Right.
But there's things you can do, or different third-party groups that are doing that work for you to make it kind of easier. So B Corps, many different things like alternatives to Amazon. There's Earth Hero.
Earth Hero.
Yeah, and they don't have everything on there, but I think also it's more just like thinking before you buy in the first place.
No,
Do I really need this?
Yeah.
No, that's great advice for a lot of things, because at the end of the day, we're like, do I need all this food, or do I need all these clothes, or whatever?
Yeah.
It's just a simple question, and then I think it starts helping you thinking, oh, okay, I'm gonna be more cautious, or not cautious. I'm gonna be more thoughtful of what I'm gonna buy. Going back a little bit to film. Obviously, studios, personally, I believe they should have a plan about this. They have the money. They also are way, like, the pollution they create is way higher than an independent filmmaker or student filmmaker. But again, what we could do in our level, like my last film is an eco-fiction film, and we also try to be as sustainable. I'm gonna send it to you. We try to be as sustainable as possible. We filmed it in Greece. And I know my producer had some knowledge on that, but also different countries have different, ways of implementing sustainability. So one thing we did was composting. And because that happened, because the owner of the house we were filming was composting himself. So that was super easy for us to do.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Then we didn't have plastic bottles at all. We had just a huge water container, and everyone had their own individual cups. It's simple things.
Yeah.
But what are a couple of tips for independent productions?
I think you outlined two really good ones: composting, if you can, and eliminating single-use plastic water bottles by having refillable. If you can, consider any production vehicles that you're going to be renting, or picture cars, if it makes sense for the story, to be EVs or hybrids. That would be great. I think sometimes people balk at the cost up front, but then you also have to think holistically the fuel savings that you're going to get on the latter half. And also, if you do want to be sustainable, that's a big impact area that you can do. If your production is going to have a generator, like, can you use clean mobile power options instead of a generator? And often, work with your DP to say, maybe you implement things like negative fill, or you work on your plan so you're not, having to power with incandescent lights. I mean, again, like, this is a creative thing, so it depends on the story, but is there a way where you can work to design a lighting plan that isn't using a lot of power, tying into the grid? Whenever you can tie into house power, you're going to save a lot. And I think sometimes people get frightened and they're like, let's just do a generator. But it's great for a lot of reasons to not use a generator. You don't have the sound problem. You don't have the noise and the fumes that are, your crew is breathing in. It's not just sustainability. Like, everything about sustainability is also about human health, because, we're not just trying to be green because it's better for people. What's better for planet is usually better for people. So I think that argument can work. Like, I think sometimes it feels out of reach, where it's like, okay, why are we doing this? It's like, oh, it's for crew health. I think that is a stronger argument. And also in some cases you can do a cost comparison and like maybe the hybrid vehicle or the EV vehicle is actually going to save you in the long run. And tying into the grid or house power is going to save you, because then you're not going to be having to spend fuel costs on generators. And there's also different things where you can bring an electrician to do a power drop to access the grid. Like if you're not able to source it from the grid with the current setup, you can get an electrician to put a power drop for you. And so, that could be, it varies depending, but like, let's say it's, I don't know, 10,000, like how much are you going to charge, how much you're going to be spending on your generator and your fuel. And so trying to think of that holistically. Another thing too is like allowing time for wrap, right? Because wrap happens and then it's a mad dash to get rid of everything. And most things get thrown away because we're not allotting or giving the time to wrap appropriately. So if you're budgeting a day, even some extra days in wrap to allow your department heads with resource intensive, departments like construction, set deck, prop, costumes, like actually giving them the breathing room and the time to wrap out and do some donations, do some returns, because otherwise everything's just going to get thrown away.
That's true.
I mean, usually, and also for independent producers, by virtue, it's going to be way better than a big tentpole studio film. Right. So you're already winning just by having a smaller footprint. So I would say, yes, worry about it, but you're not a big studio film that's
true.
But there are things you can do and implement. Yeah.
Do you feel like I feel like often I hear like one of the big probably challenges or one of the things that people probably throw at you is like, well, it's going to be more expensive and we just can't afford it. I feel like, do you think that's something that, I mean, it's not necessarily true, but do you feel like that's an argument that maybe productions use when trying to avoid to go through all the sustainability like steps?
Yeah, and I think definitely it's an argument. And I would also like to point again towards that, like, is there a way we can look at this holistically?
Right.
But also advocating for, okay, this is important. Let's put this as a line item in the budget.
Right.
So we're not trying to find money. And even in your waste disposal, like instead of it just being landfill, like let's add in recycling and compost, like a part of that. So trying to integrate it holistically and not think of it as an extra, but as something that's a part of it.
Right.
And as business as usual.
Right.
So, because we pay for a lot of things that, you say you wouldn't need necessarily.
Right.
But they're just how we do things, business as usual. So it's just about making sustainability business as usual and
make it a day where it's like, it's not something that like you... Because I feel like a lot of times people are so opposed to it and very intense about it too. And it's such a curious thing as to why, and there's always an excuse as to why not. And it's like, I find that really just interesting. And like, that must be such a battle too on your end, dealing with people like that, I'm assuming.
Yeah, surprisingly, people have been pretty open, which is nice. I think a lot of people want to do something, but yes, I definitely encounter people like that as well. I also think, everyone's working so hard, and this is just like another thing for people to think about. So I get it. Like, we don't want to add more work onto people's plates, but that's what's nice too about if you have it in your budget to make this a dedicated role of someone overseeing it, so it isn't an extra burden onto departments.
True, that's a So let's talk about the movie. Okay, why this movie? That's the first question we ask all our guests. Why you picked this movie?
Well, I picked this movie because I've been meaning to watch it for a long time, and so I figured that I'll watch it finally.
that's a good one.
And I really liked it, and I had heard a lot of good things about it. And it's interesting because I've been going to a lot of these climate storytelling events through the organizations I just mentioned. And a lot of them, they mention like don't do terrorists. Like, terrorists are the bad eco stereotype that is so played out. Like, we need to stop seeing environmentalists as terrorists because that is like a very common trope. And I think that isn't not true, and it is something to think about. Like, obviously we need representation of environmentalists as not terrorists, like regular people. But I thought that this movie did a really good job of exploring this eco-terrorism thing while also justifying it, for lack of a better word, in some ways, and exploring that question. Like, they had that whole scene when they were all drinking and they were talking about, you know, what makes a terrorist, and some of the most revolutionary movements were once called terrorists. So I think it opens up the dialogue in an interesting way. And for me, it didn't feel like a stereotypical representation of eco-terrorists, but a fresh look that was, I think, a really successful thriller movie. Like, I feel like that was the format that it followed, and it did really well.
It felt for me like the Ocean's 11, the eco-fiction version.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the movie, and I like that we got to see why people are angry and they reach a point in their life that they wanna, you know, really change things. They had different perspectives. The group of people that they, you know, started this revolution. I don't want to say there, because eco-terrorism, sometimes people take this term and make it another term that it is. I don't think that eco-terrorism, the way the property destruction was what they were focusing from the book, also in the movie. And they were.
Have you read the book?
No, but
Me neither. Yeah.
I really want to read it now, because I thought it was fiction, but it's non-fiction. So they literally wrote the script based on the book, but the book is non-fiction.
Cool.
I mean, I think one of the interesting things about this movie, and on top of the whole fighting for climate change and everything like that, there is one guy in it that's not in it for climate change. He's in it because of his property being taken away from him. And I thought that was super interesting, how, like, you had him and who he seems like he might be in real life a lot more conservative than a lot of the kids.
Like a patriot.
Well, yeah, and they're all coming together to basically, you know, blow up this pipeline, and everybody's got their own, you know, interests into why they're doing it. And he might not realize that, like, you know, I mean, honestly, it's a big fight against big corporate, right? Like, big corporate taking land away from people, putting in these pipelines, and that's affecting the environment, and it's also affecting people's livelihood and also people's, like, territory and what initially belonged to them. And I think that is what makes the movie interesting, is that it's not just about climate change. It's about the bigger picture, how it affects everyone in general. Even if you're not interested in climate change, it will affect you because of how these corporates kind of take over because of their greedy interests, because of capitalism. And it's like, I feel like it opens a bigger conversation. It brings in a huge discussion of, like, this isn't just for climate. This affects people on different platforms, and we don't see it, right? Because, like, the way the media portrays all this stuff is like, well, people who are all about climate change, like, we like to label them as crazy and all this stuff like that. And I think what the movie does successfully is show, no, like, these people are frustrated, there's reason for it, and it's not just from one perspective. It's not just from, like, the college student who wants to make a change in her life and fight for climate change. It's multiple perspectives. And I thought that was super interesting and different than what you normally see, I think, in that narrative.
Yeah, definitely. And they even had, I think the character that you mentioning, he didn't say the words climate change, but he talked about the pipeline, like, poisoning the animals.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, climate is a very politicized word.
Yeah.
And so I think it can be more successful sometimes just omitting that word and just talking about clean air and clean water.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And pollution in our communities. And they did a good job, I think, of showing who bears the brunt of the climate crisis is people who are living next to oil refineries and heavy industry. And I think it was good that they also showed that. And it was a twist at the end, too.
Yes.
I was like, oh no, what's gonna happen?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're like, they planned it the whole time.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, those characters, the couple,
Yeah.
was the most annoying for me from the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I was annoyed by them too.
Yeah.
But I think that was maybe on purpose.
I think
Yeah.
then at the end, that's why they were annoying
Because
because
they're stereotyped at the beginning for you to be like, okay, it's the freaking college students who are hipsters, and then in the end they knew much more. They knew,
The Portlandia people.
yeah,
Yeah.
They were college. Were they college students? No, they
No.
weren't.
I think they were
just
They were
like-
just super hipster.
yeah, they were
I
yeah.
was like the hipster couple.
I have no idea what they were. They had the least background. I know he came from a wealthy family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about her, but they were living in their car,
Yeah.
so they were like unhoused and they were like loitering. I have no idea. We know a little bit about them.
Yeah. I like that they had a range of characters, kind of like how we were just talking about. How they had like the college students, they had like the stereotypical what you would think of an eco-terrorist, like the couple from Portland, and they had people from frontline communities represented, and then they also had the girlfriend of Theo, which I think was
Right.
named Alicia.
I think so too. Yeah.
And she was interesting because she obviously loved Theo and was very invested, but didn't directly grow up in that environment. And so there was an interesting discussion there at the church
Yeah, Alicia, yeah.
in the flashback where they were talking about what it means to actually grow up in a frontline community. So
Yeah, that scene.
yeah.
What she was saying, I went out in the rain, and actually my skin was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And LA is the largest urban oil field
Mm-hmm.
in the nation, and there's a lot of wells. The LA Times did a map where they track where the oil refineries and wells are, ones that are active and ones that are not active, and you can see how close you live. And there was a stat that's like 500,000 Angelinos live within a quarter of a mile of an active gas or oil well. And I did a video with this girl, Nayeli Kobo, who is now a woman. So she has done, with her mom, a lot of work with this group called People Not Pozos. And they lived across the street from an oil well, a refinery. And a lot of times they're disguised. Like at the Beverly Center, for example, it's a mall, but then there's like a section.
Yeah.
Or
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And then there's like these office buildings without windows, but then there's no top, and there's like a refinery in it.
I learned about this recently.
I had no idea.
That's
I'm learning
wild
about
to me.
this now.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who've worked, and she's done a lot of advocacy and with various other groups to pass a series of laws or a law to basically create a buffer for sensitive groups, so we're not having these oil wells next to people.
Community, yeah.
Communities. And they were successful in that, but it's just so much industry that exists that's already built. And so it's really expensive, like even to plug up an old non-active well, it's like thousands, maybe millions of dollars. I don't know. But definitely thousands of dollars. And the oil companies, there's no incentive to do it. Unless
they
there's
don't gain
laws.
anything.
Yeah, they don't,
Yeah.
out of it.
I think they even make a point about at one point that it's the fossil fuel workers are just trying to make a living, and it's not like
Which
they're
is-
not the ones to blame, which I think is a good
It's true.
distinction. You know,
They
it's like
need-
no one's
Yeah.
they're not the enemy here.
And also
Like,
their health also is very
Yeah.
working in a facility like that, it's not healthy at all.
Yeah.
So they are also kind of like in difficult position. So they tried not to. They didn't want to injure them, which I think they went away with. I went away. They tried to went away from the eco-terrorism trap by having thoughtful decisions throughout the film.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they did a good job of treating the material and giving people their due.
Anything for the movie that you want to mention that we didn't mention?
Just say the visual style was really arresting. I think it helped keep me on board with the storytelling.
That's true. I really enjoyed that. It was interesting how they gave you information for the characters. It wasn't linear.
If you would have pitched this movie of like to me just verbally, where we're going to follow this eco-terrorist heist and then in the middle we're going to have flashbacks, I feel like I'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But in execution, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah.
And when they did go to a flashback, it was always usually at a moment of tension, like something blows up or right before something blows up, and then we cut away to the character. And it also didn't really linger more than necessary. I think that was a theme throughout all the scenes. Like, none of the scenes felt too long. They were all very efficient in their storytelling. And I liked, too, that they didn't try to explain anything about the bombs. They were just showing what the characters were doing, and we knew the stakes, that you could blow up and die. And so even though I didn't quite necessarily know all the technical things, I understood, okay, there's a lot of stakes.
Yes,
they
can die.
They can die. So I thought that was well done too.
Speaking of storytelling, can you share a little bit about your own works as a director, writer? What you like to make, if you have made something that you want to talk about specifically?
Sure. So I like to make environmental comedies.
Oh.
Well, let me, I guess, just go back and say why I like them, which is because I think comedy is such an interesting way in to talk about these things, because usually we're used to watching an environmental documentary and being so depressed, so paralyzed.
The world is coming.
Like, you don't feel like there's any hope. And then they don't give you any solutions. So that's what was really frustrating for me, and what I tried to do in my content that I made at BuzzFeed, where eventually after the trash video, I started focusing on just making environmental content. And I think I was doing that the last 3-4 years. And the goal was always to approach things in a more lighthearted way that doesn't want to make you curl up and die. And of course you have to be careful. And some things, some topics I did, called for a more serious tone. But I think just not pretending to be an expert when exploring, trying something around integrating sustainability into my lifestyle was an approach. So that's unscripted. But for the narrative stuff, I'm interested in comedy just because I think it's a way, way, way more effective method to reach people around these topics. Because I think people shut down, people are bored.
Yeah.
And so
confused, as you said, when you don't give some tips, actual tips to, because we know people want to know, they want to learn, they want to do things, take action. So that's so what's have you made something? Are you writing something? What's the
so I have mainly scripts that I've written 2 features. One is a comedy about, funny enough, I saw How to Blow Up a Pipe, or I saw that this movie was about eco-terrorism, and I was like, oh damn, because I had a project that is about an eco-terrorist group who kidnaps a Kim Kardashian type woman
I love that.
to try
I want to go
to get her to join their cause. But it's much less serious than How to Blow Up a Pipeline. But they want her to help them stop fossil fuels in Los Angeles, or else they will make her wear Birkenstocks, which is equally
I love
horrible as
this.
dying.
I love this idea.
Yeah.
I'm excited to watch it.
And then I'm also on the first draft of a feature where a 14-year-old boy decides that he's going to solve climate change so he can get to second base because his crush is really into the environment.
Wow. That's an incentive right there.
Yeah. And then he discovers a zero-emission fuel coming out of the desert. It's magical realism.
Oh, okay.
And then it's harnessing that, and so just comedies, climate comedies.
And they're very original. You can identify with the characters.
Why, thank you. You haven't read them. You
But
don't know.
you piece them, you piece them so nicely. So
thanks. Yeah. This is cute.
We have questions here. It's kind of like a game. You'll see.
Okay. What would a buddy cop movie starring you and any historical figure look like? Ooh. I'm trying to think who my historical figure would be. Okay, it's me and Amelia Earhart, and we're patrolling the skies for bad guys.
That's cool.
And it's based in her time, and we're shooting people down. We get in with the mob, and then we're fighting the mob and the FBI.
Okay.
But we're fighting with the mob because of the FBI is corrupt.
Oh.
And we have a fight in the sky.
Okay. Here's the movie.
And
Here's
me
the
and Amelia Earhart are buddies.
I love that.
Yeah.
And we have fun banter. And I make fun of her hat.
Okay. She's a cool
Make fun
person.
of her hat.
She has this little hat and the goggles. Okay. If you had to assemble a Avengers team of fictional characters to help you through a problem task, who's on the team and what roles would they play? Really inventive
you got like
questions.
you got all the team building.
Yeah. It's like not alone. You should have a group of friends.
You know, I don't know much about the Avengers, so I'll just like pull from any character.
Yeah, don't yeah, it's okay. You don't have to find for everyone because there are a lot.
What is my problem task? Can you tell me?
You can say a problem task that you have.
I'm trying to open a jar.
Okay.
That's
I like that.
hard
Of olives,
to
okay.
open. But I don't need just one person at a jar of olives. Yeah.
Yes.
I need 3 people
Okay.
to do this. So first I will draw on Spock from Star Trek.
God.
And he will mind meld
with
the jar of olives to try to get it to open, but that doesn't work. And then we go to the guy from X-Men who can shoot lasers out of his eyes.
Cyclops.
Yeah. And then he does it through the jar of olives, but then all the olives kind of get destroyed and the jar gets broken. And then we need someone from Harry Potter, like Hermione, to put the olives back together. And then we all enjoy them.
That's
I
cool.
love that.
I love it.
We went full circle. We went from Star Trek to X-Men to Harry Potter.
Yeah.
We got them all.
Yeah, exactly. You got
I didn't know Avengers characters, so.
It's okay.
I love it. I love it.
That sounds like a nice crossover episode.
Wow. Also, kudos for writing these cool questions. What's the worst piece of advice you've heard given to you or any aspiring creative? Quit your day job. Keep your day job.
Keep or quit?
Keep your day job.
Yeah.
No, I mean as a negative. What was the negative advice?
To quit your day job.
Okay.
You gotta keep your day job.
Yeah.
You gotta eat.
That's true. No, that's actually very
Yeah.
down to earth and important.
Exactly. I feel like every creative has a day job.
Yeah.
Perfect. So.
A depressing note to end on.
Don't
Reality.
quit
No.
Any last things you want to share before we wrap this?
Oh, another tip for independent producers is going paperless. There's cool, and directors too. Scriptation is a really good resource where you can have an iPad and you make notes, and then it also actually helps the workflow because you can share all your notes quickly with departments digitally, and you can make notes with like pen or what do they call it? A digital pen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
e-pen. I don't know.
Stylus.
A stylus.
Right,
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can make notes on a stylus and then share the notes, and so it helps improve the workflow too.
Cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Because everybody loses. Everybody loses.
Yeah.
Everyone loses all the paperwork.
You don't need to print all these scripts and these
No.
sides and distro,
Yeah.
You can just send it digitally.
where people can find you, get in touch with you.
You can go check me out on my website, aurijackson@gmail.com, and then I'm the same on Instagram @Auri Jackson.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah,
being here with
thanks for
us.
having me.
That's it.